Welcome. Glad you could make it today, and it's glad to see so many people here. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. With this acknowledgement, we honor the Indigenous people who have been living on and caring for the land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historical connection to this land. We offer this acknowledgement as a step toward reconciliation between non-Indigenous Canadians and the Indigenous peoples of Canada. In the words of Dr. Robert Joseph, currently the Ambassador for Reconciliation Canada and member of the National Assembly of First Nations Elder Council, let us find a way to belong to this time and place together. Our future and the well-being of our children rests with the kind of relationships we build today. Again, thank you everyone for coming to this annual general meeting of Beyond Housing/Mental Homes. A piece of business here. If you have member on your name tag, and if you have a blue agenda, if your agenda paper is blue, that means you are a member, and when it comes time to voting, you are eligible to vote. If you don't have either of those things, we're glad you're here, and we welcome you to participate in any asking questions after the business meeting. So thanks again for being here. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, and Chip is going to take care of that.
Generally, we're a board that looks forward, but occasionally it's good to look back just to see what we have done. So I'm just going to do a quick review of last year's minutes from our annual general meeting. There were 68 people who attended, who ventured through the snowstorm to our newest building at Bridgeport and Lancaster. Our capital assets had increased from 14 million to 44 million, partly due to the acquisition of Sprucelawn property and partly due to the completion of Bridgeport and Lancaster project. Our net assets went up $7 million to $25 million. We had $1.4 million in donations from you, our generous supporters. And then going full circle, Laverne Brubaker shared some history about Sprucelawn as we entered into the building campaign, and we set a fundraising goal for $2 million, which needed to get bumped up to 2.5, but that's other news. And then the highlight speaker was Charla, who was a resident at Bridgeport and Lancaster, and Dan and her had a very moving and thought-provoking conversation, which can probably be found on video on our website. So if you missed that, I would highly recommend you go to our website and find that video link and click on that. Do I have a mover for making the motion for passing the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as printed from the last annual.
Okay, and your names?
Jim Brusina.
Jim Brusina moves, and do I have a seconder?
Muriel Bechtel.
Muriel Bechtel seconds that. Okay. Any questions? Or just a simple pass? Okay. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay. That's been passed.
Thanks, Chair. The next item on our agenda are the audited statements for the last fiscal year. And here comes Amy to present them.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was actually nice that Chip made some high-level reference to some numbers from last year, so you can see the evolution of this organization. One more year in. So I will be presenting some highlights. For those following along that have the audited statements, for the Meta Homes Inc. operating as Beyond Housing audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2023. Once again, the audit received a clean opinion, so good work to the team. Onto the statement of financial position on the balance sheet. Every year I just quickly review. The first column, titled General Fund, represents the financial position of Beyond Housing's current properties. And the second column is the Replacement Reserve Fund. This represents the fund set aside for capital maintenance costs on current properties. And the third column, the New Projects Fund, represents all construction projects in process. So for the fiscal year 23, the New Projects Fund represents the financial activity related to the new Sprucelawn development where we are gathered today. Overall cash on hand decreased from last year as funds went towards new capital projects. Capital assets have increased again this fiscal year to 48.6 million. The main driver for this increase is the construction of the building we're in today. Overall total assets are now at 53 million. Long-term debt had a net increase from the prior year as Beyond Housing received additional debt funds for the Sprucelawn build. And we're still paying off mortgages for all existing properties. So that brings the final net assets balance at year-end to 26 million. And if we flip to the statement of operations or the income statement. As noted in previous AGMs and worth noting again today, all donations go to the capital costs of new building projects. All current properties are financially self-sustainable. Donations received during fiscal year total 1 million. A huge thank you to all of you who continually demonstrate your generosity and support of our mission. Rental revenues increased 176,000 from the previous year, primarily due to a full fiscal year of rental income from the original Sprucelawn building. And as expected, operational expenses were also higher than the previous year due to the new properties coming on board. Beyond Housing had net income for the year of 284,000, which is a solid bottom line when factoring in the significant amount of amortization on the increasing accumulation of capital assets. Overall, the revenues and expenses were consistent with the operating budget for the fiscal year. One last piece, the general fund had a cash flow positive line, which is another healthy indication that Beyond Housing continues to achieve its goal of having its housing projects be financially self-sustainable. I encourage you to review the notes to the financial statements as they will provide you with additional detailed information. At this time, I would invite, if there's any questions, to please direct them to either me or to Dan. Any questions? All right, hearing none. I would like to present the motion that the audited financial statements for Meta Homes Inc. operating as Beyond Housing for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2023 be received as presented. Can we get a mover for this motion?
I'll make that motion, Gloria Martin.
All right, that's Gloria Martin, thank you. And a seconder?
Fred Reddicoff?
Great, that's Fred Reddicoff. Thank you very much. All in favor? Excellent, motion is carried. And now to the next one, appointment of auditor. The motion is for the appointment of Edward M. Simon of E.N. Simon, CPA, Professional Corporation, as auditor for 2023-24. Can I get a mover for this motion? Not everyone at once.
Carl's there.
All right, excellent, thank you, Carl. Carl's there. And a seconder.
Jennifer Justison.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer Justison. All right, all in favor? Excellent, thank you, everyone. The motion is carried.
Thank you, Amy. All right, the next agenda item is called on your agenda. It's called bylaw changes. It's actually three different resolutions related to complying with the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. And the first, okay, so the first resolution relates to, as part of the complying with the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, is articles of amendment. There are certain things that need to be in your articles. For those of you familiar with incorporation, it used to be called letters patent. Now it's called articles. The first question that we had to deal with when we looked at this is whether we needed to change our purposes. And we decided, no, we don't need to change the purposes. We may have stated them slightly different if we were doing it today, but there's nothing about the stated purposes that tells us that what we're doing doesn't fit. So we are not changing the purposes. So the existing purposes will be in the Articles of Amendment, but what needs to be in the Articles of Amendment, which were not in the letters patent before, is the number of directors. You now need to put that in. And so we already have, and you either have to choose a specific number or a minimum maximum. Mental homes or beyond housing already had a minimum maximum, 5 to 9. So we need to put those into the Articles of Amendment and file them with the government. We only have one class of members, so that does not need to be included. So the resolution is, not the one before, please, that the Articles of Amendment state the charitable purposes of beyond housing are going to be listed as in the letters patent filed in 2001, and state that the number of directors be a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 9 directors. Could I have someone make that motion, please? Nelson Shifley over there will make the motion. And a seconder, please.
Brian Unruh?
Brian Unruh will second. All in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. Now the second item, the second resolution, in the Ontario Corporations Act, either the members or the board of directors can set the actual number of directors between 5 and 9. In our case, it's 5 and 9. And to have the directors do it, which is the simplest way to do it, is that the members need to pass a resolution to give the board that authority. So that's what this resolution is. The motion is that the Board of Directors of Beyond Housing be authorized to set the number of directors between the minimum of 5 and a maximum of 9 directors. Could I have someone move that motion, please?
Rudy Gertz.
Rudy Gertz, thank you, Rudy. And a seconder? Jennifer Horner, I see there. Thank you, Jennifer. And Rudy, all in favor? Thank you, everyone. That is carried. Now, the third resolution has to do with the actual bylaw. So I should mention that the last time you as members, that we brought changes to the bylaw here was, I believe, in 2019, so it hasn't been very long. I think it was about quorum at the time. In any case, so the bylaw that we had that was existing before the board changed it recently was very similar to what is being presented today. There aren't a lot of changes. In the package, there was this, a document right before the bylaw that kind of explains some of the changes. And it's basically some of the things that were strengthened in the new not-for-profits, the Ontario Not-for-Profits Corporations Act. We use ONCA for short. One is that in terms of the head office, as long as it's within the regional municipality of Waterloo, the board can decide where the actual head office is. You don't actually have to state a specific city. The ONCA codified a statutory duty of care for directors, so that's now in the bylaw. And there's a paragraph, which is actually 2.04, which requires, which we've been doing all along, but interestingly enough, when you are elected as a director, until you sign a form, very soon afterward, you aren't actually officially a director. So that is in the bylaw. So for those of you on boards, that's interesting to know. So it's called a director's consent to act. And the other, the remunerated director, I think you already, I mean, you probably know this. If you're on a charitable board, you are not permitted to be paid for that service, nor for anything related to the operations of that organization. The new act kind of codifies the ability for members' meetings and board meetings to be held electronically. So that's kind of we've been doing it because of some, the government made allowances for that to happen after COVID, but it's now codified. Conflict of interest of board members is now strengthened. And there is an allowance for members to submit proposals for annual meetings or special meetings, although there are restrictions about how much in advance, and the board has some leeway to not accept it and so on, but that's part of the new act. So those are there aren't major changes to what we had before, but I've tried to itemize the difference. So we have, and I should mention that the board went through all of this and approved the new bylaw at its meeting at the end of November. So the board has already taken action to do so. So the motion before you today is that the bylaw approved by the Beyond Housing Board of Directors on November 29th, 2023 be confirmed. So you are confirming what the board has approved. I have someone make that motion. Thank you. Laverne Brubaker will make that motion, and the seconder?
Stephen Clark.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Stephen Clark is the seconder. All in favor? Thank you, everyone, very much. So that has been confirmed, and that new bylaw will be filed with the and government. Since we're a charity, I think it probably has to be filed with Canada Revenue Agency as well. Okay, so that is the end of that item. The next item on the agenda is the election of directors. And let's see, do we have? I'm going to read off the slate, and assuming that everyone is present. Okay, all right. We'll list them at least. So we have two individuals who are joining the board for the first time. The first one is Ray Sands. Ray, are you here?
I am.
And please stand up so people can see you. There's Ray Sands. In your package, thank you, Ray. In your package, there's a little paragraph that gives you a little bit of short little bio on Ray. She's a retired lawyer and has had a fair bit of participation in various organizations in our region, and as she said, she recognizes the importance to funders of a stable organization, so she looks forward to continuing to be on this board to make mental homes beyond housing even more successful. We'll have to get, it's hard to know when we can go off the mental homes part of it. Okay, the second person, and I understand she's running late, so she may not be here. Her name is Fatila Balagan, and is he still coming? No, that's not her. So she currently serves as the executive director for the African Women's Alliance of Waterloo. She is from Nigeria originally and was trained as a medical doctor, but is very involved in our local community in many ways, as you'll see in her little bio. So that's the second new person. And the third person on the slate is Chip Bender, right here. And he is on the slate to be elected for his fourth and final term with the board. So we have two joining the board for the first 3-year terms, and Chip for his fourth term. So the motion will be, looking for No, I don't think we have, okay, the motion is to elect Ray, Bahila, and Ship to the board of Beyond Housing for a 3-year term. It's approval of the slate, but we're actually electing them. I'll move it. Could I have someone make that motion? And if, hold your hand up and I'll ask you to rise and state your name. Murray Lease at the back there will make the motion. And a seconder, please. Right here. Marie Martin will second the motion. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. And all in favor? Thank you. And welcome to Ray and Fahia. Okay. Next item, Chip is on board again.
Along with welcoming, and Alika just arrived, so could you stand please so that people can see who you are? Just in time, just got elected to the board.
Come late.
Yeah, exactly. That's why people show up to meetings. Along with welcoming 2 new members, today we need to say farewell to 2 of our long-term members. Generally, this is a duty performed by our chair, but because our chair is one of those members who's retiring, that duty falls to me. So I'd like to invite Nancy and Amy up to the front so that we can say goodbye to them and release them from their duties. I think they're here for the board meeting yet today.
No.
No? That's it? Okay.
We're done.
They're done.
We're not on the board anymore.
That's true. So Nancy has been on the board for 12 years. The last 3 of those has been as our chair. I have appreciated, has it been? Really? Okay.
I don't know how many.
I should have checked my numbers before that. For enough time for me to appreciate the calm, wise leadership that she's brought to the board, along with, and you saw it firsthand today, her knowledge of bylaws and how to adjust those. So Nancy, I'm going to put your number on speed dial so that when those issues come up, okay? So thank you for 4 terms of service with Menno Homes. Amy and I started at the same time 9 years ago, so we cut our teeth together on Beyond Housing and learned all the addresses and what that meant, and saw Beyond Housing grow. It had already, I think, done 1 phase of growth before we arrived, and since then the snowball has kept on rolling down the hill. I've appreciated the way that you've made numbers a lot more understandable, and have, I think you're pretty well your whole time here as treasurer. Yeah, so thank you for 9 years of service doing all the numbers. And we have a small token from Beyond Housing to present to you for all your years of service here. And then, I guess, does the membership need to vote then, or they're just released? They're just rolling there.
We're not moving off the island.
I'll make that
Are there any questions or comments that anyone, we don't really have any other business, but...
I have one question. Amy, this might be a question for you. I've noticed a lot of the loans have either interest or principal being forgivable, and so there's a potential accrued interest of 1.4 million that is not being accrued. Just wondering, like, how well established are the terms that would be required to know whether you had to pay it back or not? And given how well established they are, is there any need to have to accrue or mitigate some risk?
So the question is about the accrued interest that we're entering on some of our mortgages. Those are related to the agreements that we have with the government, the Region of Waterloo or CMHC. And so they show up on our books and continue to grow until we get to the end of that 25-year agreement, whatever we have. And then all of a sudden, one day, it's going to disappear. And so that's them holding our feet to the fire and make sure that we continue to provide affordable housing. And then once we've completed our obligation to them, then that gets waived or so it's written off the books. But as a charity that does affordable housing, we'll just continue to do it. So we actually don't really care about that.
But you don't see any risks with the terms that were agreed? You think
No,
you have no problems?
No, that's the important part about, so the question was whether we see any risks in that. And it's money that looks on our books, but the only risk we would have would be if we were to quit providing affordable housing and we lose our charitable status and all sorts of other bad things would happen first. So, no, it's not a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Any other question? Okay, seeing none,
I declare, or unless I missed something, I don't think I have.
I declare this business part of the meeting completed and closed. And now, the next thing is to call on Dan to do the next part, which is more information. Thanks, everybody, for being part of the business part of the meeting.
And thank you, Nancy, for somehow making governance somewhat exciting. I know you get excited about it. I kind of start to glaze over after a while. So we are really going to miss your experience and your wisdom and expertise in that as well. Nancy, just for your information, is the last remaining board member who was around when I started. So I've outlasted everyone else, and now I'll finally Nancy. So, and Amy, has been treasurer. I think she spent 1 year on the board alongside Dave Bechtel, kind of shadowing him, and then treasurer ever since then. And have really grown to appreciate Amy as well, and will miss her quick responses, her close analysis of the books. And it will be interesting next year to see if anyone else finds any typographical errors in our audited financial statements, because Amy always did. The numbers might have been right, but she always still found something that Ed might have just tweaked a little incorrectly. So we'll miss you both. My name is Dan Dreger, and I serve as the Executive Director of Beyond Housing, and a role that, I've been in now for 10.5 years. So it is good to see everybody here. We've really filled this little room. Last year we had it during a snowstorm, and this year I guess snow was coming a little bit, but not too bad. So thank you for venturing out on a day like this. I'm going to give some updates a little bit later on, but first I'm going to turn over to Laverne Brubaker, who has chaired our capital campaign for the Sprucelawn building project that we're all sitting in right now. So Laverne.
Thank you, Dan. You're going to see some pictures rolling around here which will not necessarily have anything to do with what I say, but they'll be rolling and showing some of the history of how we got to this point today. I'm going to repeat a little bit of the history. You've heard some of it the last 2 years. It'll be very short, and I'll tell you where we're at with the funding equation. About 40 years ago, some people from the community, from the 3 churches, got together and talked about how can we handle the need for affordable housing, seniors housing. And as a result of that, Sprucelawn was built, 30 units, and they were rent geared to income. And as you came in here, at the entrance, the L-shaped part of the building is the one that's been here for 40 years. Sprucelawn has always been managed by a volunteer community board. And we've always tried to keep our building in excellent shape, and we've always looked at the possibility in the last 10 years about how you might be able to expand. Also in the last 8 to 10 years, as people moved out, and people usually moved in and they moved out as they went to further care, we've completely refurbished a lot of the units. About 3/4 of the units have been completely refurbished with new cupboards, floors, painting, plumbing, and so forth. And so we try to keep the building in very good shape. Some years ago, before the foundry was built in Elmira, Dan called me and said, could he bring some of the Menahomes board to Sprucelawn to see how we do things? I think Martin was there and Mike Strathby and a few other people, I'm not sure who all was there. Dave, were you there too? You were there, okay. Anyways, at that meeting we talked about what we did, but we also talked a little bit about how we hope to someday expand. So after that, Dan started calling me every once in a while for coffee. And after a few years, that resulted in 2 years ago, Sprucelawn amalgamated with Menahomes, now Beyond Housing. And working with Dan and Beyond Housing has been the best thing we've ever done. Brian Schatz is here, and Van Del did the construction here. Brian did the design work, and we worked with him for about 6 years developing the plans, and then as we went into working with Beyond Housing, that whole thing rolled together very nicely. So now we have 28 units, more units, 8 two-bedroom and 21 bedroom. They're fully occupied, and the one-bedroom one was snapped up quickly in December. We had many more applications than we had rooms, and so that need is still carries on. And the original and the new building have been completely integrated. We have 58 units that are working together as one complex. And so it's a great deal of satisfaction and pride and joy that we welcome you here today. We want you to check this place out. Afterwards there's tours. The constructions take a little bit longer, and it would cost a bit more than we originally budgeted 2 years ago. We have these helical piers, and you've seen stuff here. The contaminated soil issues that we had some increased construction inflation, of course. And so our original fundraising goal was $2 million, and last year we indicated it was $2.5 million. And I'm very pleased to announce that we have roughly $2.2 million raised or pledged, and we're getting close to the end. And a very big thank you to all of you for your generous support. So the fundraising still continues for the additional $300,000. And now that you're here and I've seen the finished project, I encourage you to consider helping us with the last $300,000, so that Dan and the board can get on with the next project. So after the meeting, feel free to wander around the halls. There's a couple of rooms. I think Sean and Lisa will open up a couple of rooms here that you can take a look at them. Please respect the people that live here's home, but you're welcome to wander around the halls and have a look at what we have here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Laverne, and to the former Sprucelawn board as well. It was their vision to do something here and figure out, with Brian Johnson's help, how to squeeze 28 more units onto this very small parcel of land. But I think as you walk around and look at it, you'll agree that it's a really lovely site, and it's something that is a very respectful way of creating and building affordable housing as well. And we couldn't have done it. We kind of carried the baton across the finish line together, Laverne, but you did a lot of hard work at the beginning there, and the board to work through all of that. There's a section of the board, I guess, with Sean in the back. You can barely see Sean there, but Sean and Lisa are the live-in superintendents here. So thank you for that work. So, and yeah, that's just a snapshot of our various properties. So with this addition here now, we have 258 households throughout Waterloo region every night that call, our housing their home, and that's really incredible. Some of that has been through growth, some of it has been through amalgamations or donations, but it's a substantial portfolio for sure, and something that we're looking to still leverage into the future. This would actually be our single largest location in terms of the number of people that live, or the number of apartments that we have in one location at 58. So in terms of the theme of going beyond, which is on our annual report this year, we've really tried to build that into our new name, obviously. And I would just encourage you to read the annual report, take a look at it, because it really is a lot more than just providing affordable housing. Right? If you look at the report, you'll see that we have the community nurse, the community support worker in there. I think we make reference to some of the efficiencies that we build into projects so that they can remain sustainable energy-wise. good for the environment that way. And then, you know, add-on projects like the freezer meal project that we had this year, or even the room that you're sitting in, like the affordable housing money that we get through the region. And Jim Erb is here. Thank you, Jim, for showing up to represent the region. The region didn't help pay for this room, Jim, but your donations did. Right? And it's rooms like this that are really important for helping to build community within a building as well. And so that's kind of the whole theme of the going beyond ethos that we're trying to talk about. And we're not always perfect at it, but we're working away at it and trying to do better all the time. Looking ahead, last year I talked, our theme was a year of opportunities. And we certainly have lots of opportunities out there to do more work if the funding was available. This is just a rendering of the Phase 2 project at Bridgeport, 544 Bridgeport, corner Bridgeport and Lancaster. Those drawings are now completed. They're on the shelf. We had submitted an application to CMHC last year for Rapid Housing Initiative funding. There was only so much money to go around, and it went to our good friends at the Working Center, another very good project as well. So we're ready to move forward with that when funding becomes available. And we know that funding follows shovel-ready projects, and we could have those drawings done probably, or construction-ready drawings and go out for tender in about a month if we need to at this point. So they're ready to go. We're just waiting. And a bit of an update as well. Chip talked about it a wee bit last year. I had a really lovely conversation with Charlotte Mabey, who's a tenant at Bridgeport and Lancaster. Checked in with her earlier this week just to see how things are going, and things are going well. I mean, she continues to have areas of struggle in her life, but she's also gotten a promotion. She has the same job that she had, and she didn't get that job until she was able to find secure permanent housing, right? That was really what landed her on her feet. And in her own words from last year, created a new path, created a new story for her life. So it was good to touch base with her again. And yeah, if you go to our website and go to the Facebook link, or not Facebook, the YouTube link on our website, you can see the video from last year there as well. So with this, I'm pleased to introduce Markus Moos. Markus and I, we go way back to like 2 months ago. When I sent him an email and I said, hey, how would you like to come to our annual meeting? So I'm going to read you a little bit of the bio that he provided for me, because I actually don't know Markus very well, but I did find him very charming and easy to get to know on the phone. Dr. Markus Moos is professor and a registered professional planner in the School of Planning at the University of Waterloo. He formerly held roles as an associate director of graduate studies and director of the school. Moos holds a joint honors bachelor's degrees in environmental studies and economics from Waterloo, a master's degree in planning from Queen's, and a PhD in urban and economic geography from UBC. Moos researches and changes, and this is where I got interested in having him come to the AGM. So researches the changing economies and social structures of cities, housing and land markets, generational change, imagination, and the nature of different types of knowledge. He's fundamentally interested in these topics in an integrated way as a means of gaining a better understanding of how and why societies change, the role of public policy and planning, and the sustainability and social equity implications of all of that. He's been credited for developing youthification as a new concept to help explain neighborhood change. His research is published widely in peer-reviewed articles, books, policy reports, and press, and he's currently an editor at Urban Studies Journal, a leading academic publication in his field, and he still returned my email and said he would be excited to come here. And so we're excited to have you, Markus. I'm certainly looking forward to what you have to share, and welcome you.
Thank you so much. I think that I'll take my picture on the web. That's I'm at the age. Don't say anything. I wonder if I can plug in my. And I think you have my presentation. Yeah, it is right there. Right here. There you Perfect, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I always appreciate, particularly speaking with people who are making big changes in our communities, are really trying to help others in ways that are so important in terms of creating foundations from which people can start, housing being that one place from which we kind of do all other things in so many ways, right? I titled my presentation today something about rights, location, and value. And I'll talk a bit more right away what I mean by that. So really in a broad sense, I want to talk a bit about affordability, because I think that's in part, the large part of the work that you do is to try and create affordable housing. I'm hoping that through the sort of three areas that I'll look at, I can illuminate some, particular aspects that you might find of interest. So first, I wanted to look a little bit more at housing as a right. I know that's a value that Beyond Housing has on its own value statement. And I wanted to explore a little bit what the legal basis is for that and what that inherently means to have actually a right as a housing in the Canadian context. The second part would be to sort of look at how are location and housing connected. Right? A house or an apartment or a home, of course, are partly about, and as a large part, about having a shelter, somewhere we can be protected from the elements, right? Somewhere where we can go inside. But of course, that house also comes with a location and lots of things around it, or not, depending where you are. So I want to explore a little bit what that link has to do with affordability. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the value of land. Of course, we all know value of land goes up continuously, right? We seem to be no shortage of places where value goes up. And the question sort of increasingly becomes, right, when that value goes up, why does it go up? And if we can sort of establish that part of the reason that value goes up is because of public investments around it, we might argue that we should reap some of those returns on the value of land and put them back into public investments like affordable housing. So that's the three things I want to deal with. And let's start right away with the sort of question of a right to housing. Right? Initially, I mean, we can all, of course, we can morally argue there should be a right to housing, and I certainly agree with that. The question I want to explore is, does a right to housing exist actually in law in Canada? What does it mean? And what are actually the implications for government and also maybe for not-for-profit organizations and so forth when we have this right for housing? In some ways, in an unfortunate way, right, sometimes the best way to illustrate the need for a right to something is actually to illustrate the violations of the right. So we're going to start with some things that are, really not, good things to look at, but they sort of illustrate where more and more globally the push for a right to housing comes about. What you're seeing here is a sort of temporal progression, I think over a matter of about an hour or around that time frame, of Grenfell Tower. I don't know if people remember that in London, England, when that caught fire. And 72 people died in that fire. This was a form of assisted and affordable housing. And of course, fires can happen anywhere, but it's increasingly over time, investigations revealed that this in part, there was an outcome of years of neglect, of maintenance, deferred maintenance, and also completely ignoring the feedback that we were given from residents about this needing state of repair, right? So once, if your house is then that in such a poor condition that it becomes really likely that it might be impacted by something like fire, we're starting to see this is a violation of the right to housing. Closer to home, unfortunately, many of our indigenous, or the indigenous people in Canada are living in housing conditions that are often deemed to be violations of the right for housing, often inadequate, right, really poor state of repair. This picture comes from a CBC article where a federal minister, I believe, was visiting a community and documenting just the really poor housing and water sanitation conditions of some of that housing in the Canadian context. And I think it's actually fair to say some of the poorest housing conditions we see in the Canadian context are on Indigenous reserves and properties. So these are also, and I think this article actually talks about this as being a violation of a right to housing. We also see increasingly tent cities in our communities, even just right, around in our local communities. And part of the argument, of course, why tent cities are becoming more permanent to some example, I mean, there's of course the factors that are leading to growth in poverty and increasing number of people having difficulty affording their homes, which contributes to homelessness. But in some perhaps we say in some odd way, the right to housing comes actually to play in here, that it's actually more difficult now to get sort of quote unquote rid of tent cities, partly because courts are increasingly recognizing, well, since we have a right to housing, that if you're going to get rid of these tent cities, you better have an alternative for people to go. Right? And so this is not an argument that we should house people in temporary tent cities, but it's an argument that unless we provide alternatives, people have to shelter themselves somehow. Right? And we increasingly see, and there's plenty of research to document that, but there's also lots of lived experience people can draw to say that homelessness in this way is really a lack of affordable housing. Right? There's a lot of contributing factors, but fundamentally in many cases comes down to a lack of having housing that you with your income can afford. This has become, we can see it, Kitchener at Waterloo. This is an example from Hamilton where just a few days ago somebody actually had a baby in one of these tents in a homeless encampment, right? And so sort of saying, okay, this is sort of the state of things we're looking at in some extent of how people are housed in our own local communities. So given what we might argue these are violations to a right to housing, what's our legal basis? Well, Canada is one of the countries that has signed on to an international covenant on economic, social, and cultural rights that, and here's some quotes from it, right, that's basically include housing as an element of the right to an adequate standard of living and a building block for a life in a community with others. Now, so we as a country have signed on to that. Of course, we know more generally international covenants and agreements, they're meaningful in some way, but also inherently very difficult to enforce. And unfortunately, a lot of countries sign things that they don't necessarily live up to. Many of you might remember the Kyoto Protocol too, right? That was not the first time we agreed we're going to reduce greenhouse gases. But under this, there's very clear obligations stated, right? And the obligations aren't that now the state suddenly would have to, pay to house everyone in the same way in some luxury standard, but really it's to say that the state has a role to take steps to ensure minimum housing standards are met for everyone, right? And to allocate, and there's language around prioritizing available resources to implement that right in practice. So clearly there's a basis, we've signed on, we're saying, okay, this is what we need to do. Also then, in the National Housing Strategy, and this is kind of a boring slide, but I guess such is the nature of legislation. The National Housing Strategy in Canada in itself has a passage where and you probably can't read that, I can barely read it from over here, but it says, where a national housing strategy would support the progressive realization of the right to adequate housing as recognized, and then it cites that international covenant that we just saw, right? So even our own National Housing Strategy now recognizes that there's a role to play for housing.